Howdy, folks. Happy Tuesday. Sorry for missing out on Monday. It was just a late logistical issue that we couldn't get a show done, but we're back. We'll talk a little bit about the aftermath of the deadline and teams that in the East that maybe are well positioned or maybe didn't do well after the deadline, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Russ, start us off with the pre-show.
All right, so let's talk about the NFL for a minute. Specifically the Jets, because I wrote about this on February 22nd. You didn't have to be Nostradamus. You just had to be a Jet fan to know that when the way the quarterback landscape was laid out with Aaron Rodgers and Derek Carr and Jimmy Garoppolo, and then everybody else, there's Tannehill, there's Mayfield. You had to know that the Jets weren't going to handle this right. So I wrote about this, and I said, the Jets had a fantasy that they would get Aaron Rodgers. And, of course, Aaron Rodgers hasn't said boo. But I also said while you had him on the hook, while you're waiting on Aaron Rodgers, Derek Carr could get tired and go to the Saints or the Panthers. He went to the Saints. And so now he's out. And then, of course, there's reports. There's always reports that want to protect the franchise because they, people get sources and they want to protect the franchise. So then they're like, well, they could always go with a backup plan to Jimmy Garoppolo. But the thing is, in the NFL, and especially with the quarterback position, a backup plan, when the guy knows you haven't spoken to him and you're literally his third choice, when the Raiders have Garoppolo as their first choice, he's going to talk to the first choice people first. Then he'll talk to you and try and drive up the price. But he's not going to go to you because he was the third choice. And so the Jets are now in this spot where I thought they would be in, and I predicted they would get Ryan Tannehill. And so far, that's with the spot that they're in. And Kev, I know you've gone through these consternations too with the Lions. And part of it is because guys don't want to play there because they just don't think you're a Super Bowl team yet, even though the Jets are an up-and-coming team. And then part of it is they don't want the pressure of New York. And then the other part is the Jets bungle it every time.
Yeah. Well, the situation finally has sort of changed in Detroit. Like, they're kind of a trendy team. Like, and I think all of it had to do with, the Hard Knocks series or whatever it's called these days.
Yeah, well, the Jets are going to get Hard Knocks this year, it looks like.
Yeah. Well, that played a role. People saw, what Dan Campbell was about, and people really like him. Plus, it's almost as if the Lions won the Super Bowl here in Detroit. So everyone feels they can be in on. There's rumors of all kinds of big names kind of coming here. So there's a feeling that, they can be in on whoever they want to be in on, at least in on them. Like they have a legitimate shot to get them. But, I just moving away from that topic just a little bit, but connected to the NFL, I heard something and it was really fascinating. The guy was really bright and he was talking about, the way teams build teams, or way GMs build teams with regard to career expectancy. And, and it had to do with the Lions. They have a pick down in the 18 level. And there's some thought that they may go just a little off the board, not a lot off the board, and maybe take a guard there. And, some fans were hooting and hollering about, they don't need a guard. Like one of their strengths is their line and all that. And the guy came on and he talked about career expectancy and the study thereof, and about, that, lineman, if you get a good one, is going to have a career expectancy of 10 years.
Right.
And the other thing he brought up, which we all know but never think about, all defensive linemen, or at least 85% of them, rotate.
Mm-hmm.
So those guys don't even play like full time. So where a starting offensive lineman plays every offensive play.
Every snap.
Yeah, every snap. So, his argument is, the reason they stopped taking running backs was, career expectancy was running back was just over 2 years. So you're kind of not wasting a pick, but you're going to get a longer term out of these other guys if you take them. And he says the same should hold true. If you can get a lineman who can upgrade your lineman, and you figure, he's going to last 10 years. It makes more sense than take another defensive tackle, which now gives you 5 that you rotate, and none of them play. Plus their career expectancy is lower than you think as well. It's certainly not as long as a wide receiver, for example.
Well, Jan, the one common thread I think that the Jets, your team, the Bills, my team have, is that I think they've been challenged with their offensive lines over the last few years. Now with Josh Allen, because he's so mobile and relatively durable, he's able to escape situations and take punishment, but I think that's going to pile up over the years, and if you want to have him play 10, 12, 13, 14 years in the NFL, the Bills are going to have to invest in offensive linemen. But all that they're talking about right now in Buffalo is adding another wide receiver because they don't have enough weapons. Now with the Jets, I think they have the weapons. They drafted a great running back. They drafted a really good wide receiver. Now the question is, can they find the quarterback? And yesterday, their talk was that Aaron Rodgers and the Jets had spoken. I'm still skeptical about whether that's going to come to pass, but what do you think?
So a couple of things. So if you look back in the era where the Jets had a lot of success, and Russell hearkened to this also, right? They took Mangold and Ferguson, and Brickenshaw, Ferguson, and Mangold, 2 guys. You talked about guys who never missed the snap. Those are 2 guys who never missed their snap, and my opinion, Mangold probably has borderline Hall of Fame credentials given how well he played. Fast forward, they took Mekhi Becton, had a good first year, and then ever since he's been hurt, which has created a massive hole at right tackle. They took Vera Tucker last year, and a guy who showed he can play all over the place, and unfortunately he got hurt. They picked up Dwayne Brown this year because they needed help, and he got hurt. They picked up George Fant last year, and he got hurt. So teams have gone either the Cincinnati model, where they needed an offensive lineman, but they doubled down, and they took Jamar Chase to give Burrow another weapon, and they made a run, and a lot of teams are kind of going with that model. The Jets clearly need offensive lineup, as you said. They drafted Breece Hall. Unfortunately, he tore his ACL. They got Garrett Wilson also in the same draft, and they definitely have a number 1 wide receiver. And guys like Corey Davis and other guys haven't panned out, but there's enough weapons there that this should be okay to be able to supplement. With the Rodgers, look, the problem with Rodgers is twofold. 1, he's a head case. I don't think any of us will deny the fact that he's definitely a little bit of a head case. 2, the cost to acquire. How much is Green Bay going to want in return, and how much is that going to potentially set your franchise back, and how long is Rodgers going to play? And lastly, honestly, the contract is a massive cap hit. I mean, look, $59 million. Geno Smith got a good deal. It's actually a lot better than people reported originally. It's not the 105. It's actually closer to 75 with $30 million in incentives, and the guarantee's not bad. Carr got about 37, but he's only got like a $7 million cap hit this year, so that Danny Dimes, Danny wants a huge contract from the Giants, whether or not they reach it. But to give Rodgers, as good as he is, as much of a diva as he can be, $58 million, unless they do a massive restructure and surrender 3 first-round picks or 2, that's a pretty significant haul, even for a team that probably
gets cut to the chase.
I personally don't have a problem with Garoppolo. I know he's hurt all the time.
They don't want Garoppolo.
Well, I know they don't. I personally would not have a problem getting Garoppolo in that position.
I like him. He's my number 1. But you know what the problem is? And I mentioned before you got here, Garoppolo knows that he's the number 3 choice on the Jets and has to wait until what Rodgers says, and he's the number 1 choice of the Raiders. So what kind of chance do you think the Jets have now?
Well, here's the question. Do you want to go to the dysfunctionality that consistently becomes the Raiders, which is part of the reason why Carr couldn't get out?
He knows McDaniel.
Yeah, and what has McDaniels done?
But it doesn't matter. He knows him.
Yeah. As long as he gets,
but he also knows Salad. He knows the coaching staff on the Jets. So,
Jan, as long as he gets paid, it doesn't matter.
It's all about how much you're going to give me and how much it's more how much you're going to guarantee, not how much you're going to give me. How much is actually showing up in my pocket that's guaranteed over 2 to 3 years.
I think he's going to go to the Raiders. I'd love him to go to the Jets, but I don't think it's going to happen.
All right,
but you need a good backup if you do that, Russ, because he's always hurt. That's the problem.
All right, let's start the show. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Tuesday, March 7th, 2023.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
I'm Jan Levine.
I'm Kevin Allen.
And I'm Michael Agello, and I remembered the date. And this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Okay, let's talk about it's breaking news because it happened in the last hour, and I think it was a pall hanging over on the weekend and yesterday regarding the team that I cover, the Maple Leafs, the injury to Ryan O'Reilly. Good news on that front, as O'Reilly had surgery on his broken finger. I believe it was a shot from Austin Matthews. He was in front of the net and hit his hand. And as soon as you looked at the reaction, Kev, you knew it was broken. It was just, but he had surgery this morning. Estimated time for him to be out is 4 weeks. Playoffs are 5.5 weeks away. So if everything goes as expected, O'Reilly will be back a week or so before the playoffs. Maybe they even hold him out the rest of the regular season because of LTIR. They were able to call up a couple players, and they were right up against it. So now they have some flexibility with him on long-term injury. But it was something that a lot of Leaf fans were concerned about because they remember Nick Foligno coming in 3 or 4 games into his Leaf career. He suffered a back injury and was never the same. Finger injury is a different thing, and barring anything unforeseen, Ryan O'Reilly should be back for the playoffs.
Yeah, and the one thing that you get with hand or finger injuries is it becomes pain management at the very end. Like usually they say 4 to 6 for a hand injury, right. And usually guys come back on the shorter end of that. Because they're playing with a little bit of pain. Usually there's screws involved. So, you're back together pretty quickly, and then, you're just trying to get in. And more importantly, you can skate while you're, rehabbing that hand. So, he should be able to, come back in relatively good shape. It won't be game shape, but he'll be have pretty good conditioning. So that's really good news for the Maple Leafs.
No, I was just finishing up my article for Hockey Buzz. I'm actually concerned, Russ, more with, because in this instance, it was essentially, a time frame for the finger to heal. And if it wasn't, Jeff Merrick gave a good breakdown of this on his morning show. If it's not involved with the knuckle, if it's just a break at like one of the places in the finger, then they put a pin in, and it's just getting this slowing down and the pain, as Kevin was saying. If it was involved with the knuckle, it could be.
They don't have to always put a pin in, by the way, for broken.
No, they don't have.
No, they don't.
Fingers with no pin.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that, but
No, I was saying,
they do.
Yeah, I was saying that was I mean, we'll never know the detail of it.
Yeah.
But I think the Leafs are more concerned about John Tavares, who took 2 really big hits from Dakota Joshua and Tyler Myers within about 15 minutes of each other in the first period against Vancouver. He's not playing tonight against New Jersey. Now they're saying, well, we're just being overly careful, and he practiced on Monday, and he should be back for Saturday. But Tavares had a severe concussion from that Corey Perry hit in the playoffs less than 2 years ago, and obviously they're better safe than sorry situation with them, but it has to be a concern.
No, it's a concern. I mean, he's been in the league a long time. He's taken punishment. They could say that he's sick because maybe he is physically ill, because that's part of the, complications of getting a concussion is you do throw up and you do feel ill. So that's fine. They're not lying, but they're probably not telling the full truth here either. I think Saturday's still a pipe dream for him to play. We'll see. There's really no reason to have him play Saturday, to be honest. I mean, we get back to that.
Right.
They really should wait longer. I would on their end, they should be on the longer end of the recovery for this than the shorter end, and not worry about what the media, what the media thinks. Because again, if you don't have John Tavares 100% for the playoffs, you're in trouble.
And the way they couched it, Russ, is like we'll see later in the week how he's feeling, but if he's feeling right, but they were making sure that they had an out in case, and that's one of the things that they did at the deadline was add a lot of versatility so they can move guys like Achari up or move Lafferty into the middle. So they have some options, and really they're either going to finish in second or third in the Atlantic, and they're going to play Tampa. So there's no reason to rush somebody into the lineup before they're ready. Now, on the other side, Victor Hedman got poleaxed, I think it was by Svechnikov on Saturday. He is day-to-day, but there is some concern about him, and it's either concussion or upper body. And when it comes to Tampa, there are certain players that you just don't mess with, and Vasilevsky and Victor Hedman are 2 of those.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're sitting Hedman rightly so. erring on the side of caution, I mean, those two teams are pretty much on a collision course, right? So both squads can do whatever they need to do just to make sure that they don't take any chances with their players from an injury perspective. Neither one of them are definitely going to move up to the one spot. It's highly doubtful that either one of them drop at all. So if you know all you're really playing for, really to a certain extent, is home ice advantage, and at this point in time, both teams know they can probably win on the road against their opponent. So there's no reason. So as Russ said, erring on the side of caution, being on the longer end, sitting players out maybe an extra game or two that you might not normally have to do so if you were in a race, is probably the prudent course of action. And I think John Cooper, other than the fact that he benched guys because he wasn't happy with their play the other night, is probably going to go with the wiser move and just make sure he gives Hedman sufficient time so that he's 100% heading into the latter part of the season.
And Kev, like I said in off the post on Sunday, I almost got the feeling, yes, Cooper was not happy with the way the team played on Saturday, and he sat Kucherov, Point, and Stamkos in the third period of the game in Buffalo. But I thought it was almost as much because they were playing Carolina the next day, and Vasilevsky was in the goal, and they had a chance to win that game. And then I think midway through the third period, they had like 4 shots on goal. It was just a complete mail-in effort by the Lightning, and the Lightning have lost 5 in a row, and they're not playing very well, but right now isn't the beginning of the playoffs.
Yeah, I thought you were probably right about that. They were just sort of managing their time since they had that opportunity, and plus they could send the message. Although when I saw Steven Stamkos interviewed, and he didn't seem like he saw it in that regard. So I think Cooper was mad at them, and he thinks they need more. And to be honest with you, if you've been watching them play, there's something wrong there. There's no doubt about it. And I think they are, just adding to what Jan said. Like everything coming out about the Hedman injury is pretty encouraging. Like that, I think you're right. I think they'll err on the side of caution, but they don't seem very alarmed by this. So
no, he tried to play too that game, and he took a skate around.
Yeah. So I don't think there's any real, like, they're not worried about it as much as we'll see how it goes. But Cooper was alarmed by what he has seen out of them, and even though I saw them recently live, and they thumped Detroit, but it was all Vasilevsky. This Lightning team just didn't look like.
Yeah, Point's the only one like really playing well right now, but I think Cooper's also just trying to get them in the right mindset. He's got some new players. I think he doesn't want them to sort of like coast into the playoffs. I think he realizes, hey, Toronto's a good team. We want to beat them again. We've got to be, at our best. And I think he's just getting them through the mental gymnastics of all this. And I think he's starting early. And I think, he knows what it takes. He knows what it's going to do. I don't think he's that concerned. I think he let everybody know he was concerned so the players would take him seriously. But I just think that in the end, I don't think he's that concerned yet. Now, if they get shut out by the Flyers 6-0, then we could talk.
Yeah. Mike, I did want to talk a little bit about yesterday. Connor McDavid ended up with his 124th point, which is the most points he's ever had. And, we never really, even though we all acknowledge that he's the most dynamic player in the game, we never really talk about his level of accomplishment. I mean, like right now, he's on a pace for, I think, 156 points, I figured out this morning. And, of course, that would be the highest point total in 25 years. But this is what's remarkable to me. Like, this is hardly the 1980s. In the 80s, we had guys, Gretzky over a couple hundred. We had points a couple of times. We had Mario Lemieux at 199. Steve Yzerman had a monstrous year. Sergei Fedorov had a monster. We had guys well over 100 points. It was the era of goal scoring. This is not that era now. Now, scoring's up over the last couple of years. And yet, when I looked this morning to double check this, Connor McDavid is ranks fourth in points per game. It's not like he's been in the league a couple of years. He's been around the block for a while. And the only 3 players in NHL history that have a better points per game average, of course, are Gretzky, Lemieux, and Mike Bossy. The only other active player in the top 15 is Sidney Crosby. And and Connor McDavid obviously is significantly ahead of him as well. So I just think sometimes, much like Ovechkin, when we were watching Ovechkin pile up these goals, yeah, we were acknowledging that he was having great years and everything, but we never saw him in the big picture until he got to the end here. Now we're going, oh my God, he's got a real chance to take down Gretzky. And
I did write about this the other day, Kev. McDavid. I wrote an article about the best 3 skaters in the NHL. So I brought up McDavid, Hughes, and Makar. And when I was writing about McDavid, I said, well, he already passed his career high in goals. He's already 7 or 9 assists away from his career high in assists. He's going to get his career high in points. So he's shattering all his personal records this year. But I brought it up in line of his skating because he's also, one of the top 3 skaters. He's the fastest, but then if you take other things into account, you could bring in the other 2 guys into the conversation. But all those guys, and McDavid included, is their unbelievable skating, their stopping, their starting, their edge work, their speed is what gets them all these points because it's nearly impossible to cover them. Right. And even when I was asked about this today on Sirius, they said, well, how do you cover them? I'm like, well, you can't play gap control against those guys because they just kill you. Makar goes on the side wall and he kind of fakes it like he's slowing down. He's got the puck. And then the minute you try and get him along the wall, he goes past you. Once he gets that first step past you, it's over. And then McDavid decides once there's enough gap in between 2 defenders, he'll just split them. Well, go right to the net. And so you have to be sort of in the vicinity of these guys, but have guys that are fast stopping and starting defenders, or you're screwed.
Well, Jan, it's like that bad NHL.com commercial that we see incessantly on ESPN Plus about the video games and the cheat
codes, Mike.
And how McDavid is a cheat. And McDavid is a cheat code because you watch him. Like I didn't see much of the Buffalo game, but when they played Toronto earlier last week, he had 2 goals in the first period, and it was like he just flew through the zone. He was uncoverable. Gretzky was not the fastest guy in the league. He was just the most evasive. McDavid is the most evasive, and he's the fastest guy. So I'm not saying he's better than Gretzky, but in today's game, in today's parlance, he's just incredible. He's unbelievable.
So a couple of things on that. So the best way I refer to it, and it's like any sport, you sort of after a while become immune to greatness, right? It becomes normal as opposed to abnormal based upon when you watch him. And it's in any sport, I think we have the same thing. On the Gretzky piece, everybody talks how Gretzky wasn't fast, but find me a highlight where he got caught from behind on anything because he never seemed to. No. And McDavid, look, I think with McDavid, I would say the problem in air quotes is until his team kind of goes to a cup final or he carries them there, it's almost like with Ovechkin, right? We always had the Ovechkin is great, but it was always like Crosby was viewed as the team player because he helped carry those teams to titles at times. And Ovechkin was viewed as he is an individualistic player, but he's not a team leader or can carry a team until they finally win. With McDavid, unfortunately, given the roster they put around him at times, it's become the same thing, even though they did make a run to the Western Conference Finals because he kind of carried them. So, unfortunately, we've become immune to just how good he is. But as Kevin kind of pointed out and Rusted, right, the skill set that he has is beyond the pale compared to others in the league. We just don't necessarily recognize it all the time because we've gotten immune to it.
And the weekend revealed something about Edmonton, Kevin. It sort of illustrates my point. He needs help. He's the greatest. He's the best player in the league, but he can't do it on his own. And on Saturday, he was banged pretty hard by Winnipeg. Winnipeg was very physical with him, and they scored 5 goals, but they lost 7-5 because Jack Campbell did not have a good game and they didn't play well defensively. And then on Monday, Stuart Skinner's in the lineup against Buffalo, and Stuart Skinner was great, and they win 3-2. I think they have to make a decision about who's going to be that number 1 instead of rotate, because it can't be McDavid having to score 2-3 goals every game for them to have success in the playoffs.
Yeah. Well, let me address just to piggyback a little bit off of what Jan said about regard. Earlier in the season, even though he was having just an exceptional season, what did you hear about Connor McDavid? The but, as Jan said, yeah, but he's a minus player. Like, how can you be that good and be a minus player? Now all of a sudden he is up to plus 10, but the team has played better, and that minus was really a reflection of that, more so than the fact that he's like a horrible defensive player and all that kind of stuff. But that then speaks to what Mike's talking about. Yeah, the goaltending, Jack Campbell. I've seen him play very, very well when he was in Detroit, and I talked to Ken Holland about him, who thought he was right back where he wanted him to be, but now he's not there. and now he's gone back down. And maybe Mike's right about Mike Campbell,
Jack Campbell.
Jack Campbell. Because he didn't like that signing right from the beginning. He saw too much of him last in Toronto, and I've been watching the Oilers play, and he just doesn't look comfortable out there. And they're going to need him. This is a very good team, and they've got a chance to win. The West is wide open, but they're going to have good goaltending. So they are going to have to make a decision about whether they go with Skinner or with Campbell.
Yeah, but I'm serious. I had the same debate 10 minutes ago, half hour ago, and it was about Campbell and Skinner. And I said, Campbell's had a bad year, but it's the same debate the Leafs are going to have when they decide who they're going to put in net to start the playoffs too. They don't know who their starting goalie is either. They're probably going to start Murray if he could play, just because he has the 2 cups. And when I was asked about Campbell and why Mick was like, well, why isn't Skinner the number one? I'm like, because they paid all the money to Jack Campbell and there's still time left in the season. That's why. The one thing about Campbell, whether you like him or not, whether you want to pigeonhole him or not, and even Mick agreed the playoffs were not his fault last year, he does get wins. When he plays with a team, he does get wins. He will pile up wins even if his stats aren't good. So it's clear that players like playing for him, but it's also clear his game is off right now. And so I don't know. Both those teams, I couldn't tell you who the number one goalie is going to be to start the playoffs.
Yeah,
I would. Sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
But I was going to say, Campbell is a good guy. He's a good teammate, and his teammates want him to succeed. But at his highest level, what we saw like last October and November, October and November of 2021, which he got into the All-Star game because of those 2 months. He's one of the best goalies in the league. The problem is it balances out with him having long stretches where he's terrible. And he gives up deflating goals when he's playing that badly. So if you're looking for consistency, I mean, I don't know if Stuart Skinner can handle the crucible of the
I'll give you an example, Mike. Stuart Skinner came here in Philly. He matched up against Carter Hart, a guy he trains with, his buddy, and he lost.
Right.
So you don't know what's going to happen with him in the playoffs because it's uncharted territory.
Right. And Jan, it's like with Toronto, I'm convinced game 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs, if they're at home, they might start Samsonov because his record at home is like 17-2-1. But I think they think the best chance they have of beating Tampa is with Matt Murray in goal. And if he's healthy, then they might. That's where they may be using both goaltenders in that series. But I mean, that's something that the Rangers don't have a problem with because we know who's going to start game 1 versus in game 7 of every game in their playoffs.
Yeah, I would probably give Skinner a run right now just to kind of see if we do. I mean, Campbell has just been so horrifically bad. I mean, I think Edmonton, a couple of small moves they made. I mean, we talked about obviously the Barry and Ekholm trade, which will help them slightly defensive. I mean, the Nick Bukestad addition was actually a really nice addition because they needed some help on that 4th line. And given what they paid to get him and what he kind of brings to the team helps. But I would go with Skinner and Michael, as you said. I mean, Samsonov's record on the road is horrific. I mean, it's just embarrassingly bad, the dichotomy between the two. And would be weird to kind of play one goalie in the playoffs at home and one goalie on the road. You'd like to get a goalie, in a flow, but the numbers are so stark. You almost have to consider whether or not Samsonov is a guy you go with at home and Murray's a guy you go with on the road. Cause I don't know if you can go into Tampa, let's say down 2-1 in a series or something and go, yeah, we're going to trust Samsonov on the road.
Here's a question to answer. And this really applies when you're talking about Campbell. If you're a coach, would you prefer kind of an average goalie that you know what you're going to get game to game, solid, maybe dependable, or do you want a goalie like Campbell who can be very good but also can be just terrible? And that inconsistency, I think, for me, I'd rather have the steady guy, even if he's only an average goalie, than a guy that I just don't know what I'm going to get.
I guess the question is how whether or not the coach is willing to have a quick hook. So if he gets down 2-0 early, is he willing to make the change and put somebody in immediately? Or is he going to be waiting with, as you said, Kevin, he has that potential expectation where the guy could stand on his head and reel off 6, 7, 8 brilliant saves in a row, or puts the average guy in knowing that he's not going to be able to do that?
Ilya Samsonov on the road, and then we'll get off of this. He's under 500, 5-6-1, 3 goals against, 899 save percentage. At home, 17-2-1, 2.01 goals against, 926 save percentage. Murray is better on the road and not.
Here's the dilemma, though. I'll give you the dilemma. So what do? Samsonov starts at home. He loses.
I think you go with Samsonov game 2, and if you're down 2-0, then you're switching to Murray.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? Like that's that's a great,
Yep.
but the reality of the playoffs is even greater, and we know there's a chance that's going to happen, and so then that does sort of change it, and that's why I think they're going to go with Murray game 1 if he's healthy, just because it's Matt Murray.
I think they're going with Matt Murray game 1. Okay, we're going to talk about the teams in the East after the deadline, but I just wanted to touch on this because I saw this report from Andy Strickland, and he was quoting a league source on rumors of Atlanta and Houston being targeted as 2 potential expansion teams in the near future. Now, Kev, I'm all for Houston, but I'm for moving Arizona there. Not as now we know that the NHL wants to expand. Probably, they see $600-700 million in expansion fees that they don't have to share in hockey-related revenue with the players. So it's a nice, and they see the success of Vegas and Seattle. So that's the reason why they want to expand.
Yeah, for sure. And it goes beyond that too. They're a gate revenue-driven league. So unlike the NFL and the NBA, they're not looking to expand. They're not looking for more butts and seats. They've got television money galore. That's not the NHL. So the more teams they have, the more revenue they generate. So, they are going to be looking to expand rather than to drop in. But, they may not have a choice. Like if we don't get the good vote in Arizona and they can't cut a deal with the Suns, then they might eventually have to move. But I don't know. I keep hearing that they feel like they've got this deal with the Suns that could work out. I don't know any particular.
Well, it's interesting if you say that
as a fallback.
As a fallback.
It's interesting that you say that though, Kev, because I'm not shocked at that because I still think chances of getting people to vote for 3 different things. All positively, and is going to be a chore.
I mean, am I not wrong? If they vote for that and they build that building in Tempe, so now you have a building in Tempe, you have where the Suns play, you have America West in downtown Phoenix, which I think is not being used for anything right now because the Suns moved out of it, and you have the Gila River Arena. You'd have 4 stadiums. 4 arenas in the general Phoenix area, and there's only 2 teams, 1 basketball and 1 hockey. It's asinine.
Football, but you mean indoor teams?
No, I'm talking about all winter sports.
Yeah, what that tells me is if you've gone down there to retire, you've gotten taken advantage of by your local constituency and building arenas at your cost because they simply don't work there. They don't. The only thing that has worked there is the college and the Cardinals. Everything else hasn't worked. It's all worked partially. And they could talk to, people could say it till they're blue in the face. Well, it's about this, and this should be downtown, and this should be here, and that should be there. And at the end of the day, at some point, people actually just have to show up. And
they look in blips, though. I mean, the Suns drew for a while, right? When they were good with Stoudemire and Nash, they drew, right? And when they had runs, now obviously with Durant there, they're probably going to draw again.
Yeah, they'll draw now.
They're a contender to win, right?
And when the Coyotes had Tkachuk and Roenick, they drew, but that was downtown Phoenix. I've been there. I mean, for people, they say the center of their fan base is in Scottsdale. When they were playing in Glendale, they had to go 45 minutes through the city of Phoenix to go to Glendale. It was stupid to move there.
Right, but
they don't like driving there. Let's put it that way. From
even that wore away. Even that attendance downtown wore away.
But where is it that you don't have a problem getting to the arena? It's not easy for anybody. But it just in Arizona, they just don't seem to want to deal with that. And to me, that's part and parcel of being a sports fan. Is
I'd rather drive 40 miles with no traffic to get where I'm going, Kev, to that arena than drive like an extra 10 miles to get to Citi Field when there's all kinds of traffic.
Anywhere in New York, it's hard to get to the arenas unless to drive to an arena. And, it's always hard. But for some reason in Arizona, and I've written about this before, it's just not part of the culture. They don't want, they would rather not go than to, put up with whatever aggravation is required to be a fan.
Just conversely, there are people that will drive 3 and 4 states to go see the St. Louis Cardinals.
Yeah, no.
They do.
Well, Jan, this is the thing about this report, and Andy Strickland said he's not, that his source said, not sure that these two cities are even at the top of the list. Houston, we know the history. Houston Aeros, the WHA. Gordie Howe played there. They haven't had professional hockey there in almost 50 years, but it's a top 5 television market in the U.S. That's the draw, and a major, so big population. A lot of people, friends of mine, have moved from Buffalo to Houston. So there's a lot of Northeastern people that have moved down to Texas. Atlanta, I mean, how many kicks at the can this? Atlanta is a terrible sports city. The Braves were one of the best franchises for years, and they don't draw, which is ridiculous. And the Thrashers, I mean, they had to find a home for that team because people weren't going to Thrashers games.
Well, and also you have the Atlanta Flames first before that. So
yeah.
Friedman and Marek, though, had something really good. So their lead song for their podcast yesterday was AC/DC, and the lead song was TNT. And what sports network is located in Atlanta, and who has the rights now for the NHL? So that could potentially be a partial driver
into the rink, though.
But it could be a partial driver as to why they may want it down there based upon the station being there also. Not saying, look, my opinion is I'd be surprised if Atlanta's second. I would say Houston, and the argument was people in Quebec probably went apoplectic when they heard this news because they probably imploded.
Atlanta's going to fail. It barely works for baseball.
Yeah.
It finally worked a little bit for baseball now that they moved it. It's working.
How many times, Russ? How many times have they moved? How many times have they moved? Also, I mean, it's ridiculous how many stadiums they built.
I know it will completely fail for hockey. It doesn't matter who's in back of it, who's in charge of it, who's pumping. There are not going to be enough tickets every night. There's not.
I don't have any source on this, but I am very, very doubtful that Atlanta is a favorite to get that. I think we're talking about something that isn't going to happen. So
yeah, I mean, there are other cities like Milwaukee or Charlotte or Portland, and Quebec's got the building. And I'm not going to put Kansas City because that building's been sitting there.
That building, forget it.
But I mean, those are the NHL likes markets where they're like the only thing, and
Portland would make sense because then you'd have something.
Yes.
Seattle, you'd have and Vancouver. You'd start to be building out the Northwest a bit. I like that. I've mentioned,
and it's a big enough market. It's a big enough market, but as we've seen also, right, the NHL, once they move somewhere, will exhaust every single possibility to be able to remain there. They're not going to move once they're there.
They didn't exhaust that much for Atlanta. Let's be real.
Suppose the owners just walked away, though. They didn't want to own the team anymore. They kind of didn't have a choice anymore because nobody wanted to run that team anymore.
No, but
look at Arizona, though. How many machinations have we gone through in Arizona? They could have very easily said, you know what?
For Arizona, but I'm just saying for Atlanta, they didn't try as hard as they've tried for other franchises.
No, but Jan is right. I mean, at the end, the owners they basically wanted to hand over the keys. Like they had no interest. Right. They really didn't have any options to move it. So,
okay, so let's talk about post deadline here. And Kevin, came up with a good method of talking about the teams after the deadline. We'll talk about the Eastern Conference today, Western Conference tomorrow. We're going to have Joe Yerdon on the show. The way we're couching it is after the deadline, who do you believe in and who do you not believe in? And I'll start here. I believed in the Boston Bruins before the deadline, and I believe in them more after the deadline because the addition of Bertuzzi, and now like you see Orlov, who was I think Player of the Week this week, and Hathaway is another physical forward. And I mean, I watched that game on the weekend, Jan, with them playing the Rangers, and we'll talk about the Rangers in a minute. But I mean, Boston, I've never seen a team as much just like everything is clicking, and we know that can change in the playoffs. But right now, they look just like an absolute juggernaut.
I mean, they set the record for fewest games to hit 100 points. I mean, they've been on a complete juggernaut all season long. They lose Taylor Hall to injury. They were able to go out and get Bertuzzi right before the deadline to replace Taylor Hall. Dmitry Orlov makes their blue line just ridiculously deep. I mean, you look at what you're getting out of already this year with Lindholm, who came over last year, and McAvoy, who missed the first part of the season coming back from his shoulder surgery. Goaltending between Ullmark and Swayman has just been ridiculous. They've been a phenomenal team. But again, like we said with others, right? Which goalie are you going with in the playoffs? And do you have complete confidence in Linus Ullmark being your number one heading into the playoffs? Not that you've seen anything that would make you doubt it, but you also don't know whether or not either one of them will do the playoffs. I mean, and also it's a mild two-headed monster, though, leaning more Ullmark than Swayman. But it wouldn't shock me at some point in time if Swayman takes over as the number one, just from a talent-based perspective of what he has.
I mean, Kev, that is the only unknown, the only potential chink in the armor is Ullmark did not have any playoff experience in Buffalo. You know, he comes over and he's going to win the Vezina. He's running away with it. Their defense is great, as Jan said. Their forwards are deep and talented, but the goaltending might be the only question. But right now, there is no question. This team just looks like, you know, everything is hitting on all 8 cylinders.
Yeah, I mean, they really have just hit it out of the park in all areas. And, you know, their overwhelming experience in terms of, you know, at all positions. And they really did some target bombing with their, you know, their acquisitions in terms to add more grit, which they wanted to do. They wanted to solidify their defense to make it almost near invincible. And I thought they did that with Orlov. And, you know, I think a lot of teams around the league sort of underestimated the value of Bertuzzi. And, you know, you got to think of it when you're facing an opponent 7 times in a playoff series, he's far more aggravating than he is on a one-game basis. And, you know, he's not a heavy hitter. He's just aggravating. He's always there. He's always in the front of the net. He's always in the corner. He's always got something to say. He's a great teammate in terms of when there's trouble, he's always first in line. And, you know, when Dylan Larkin broke down at his departure and, you know, called him one of his best friends, he said, how many times did he, you know, protect me? And just recently it happened when there was trouble and there was Bertuzzi right with going at the guy because he had done something to Larkin. So there's great value there in his addition. I just feel, and this is just total guess, that Ullmark's the guy. He's just had such a remarkable season, and Swayman's got plenty of time, but he's younger. He's just a little less experienced. So I would say that the one concern that I have is they've got some injuries. Taylor Hall, in particular, is a guy they're concerned about. But yeah, you know, they've done nothing to discourage the idea that they are the team to beat.
Russ, I mean,
Mike will ask also if they do win, does Bergeron and Krejci both hang up their skates? Because both of them came back.
They win a cup, yes. I think
both of them came back on exceedingly team-friendly deals, each of them from 1 year. Krejci coming back, obviously, from overseas. And Bergeron was, you know, whether or not he was going to come back or not was up in the air. And them coming back on lower dollar figures enabled them to, you know, signing Lindholm, now signing Pasternak and other guys that kind of clearly helped them, especially in a fairly flat cap.
Yeah, I mean, if they don't win, then they could come back again. I mean, they seem to enjoy playing for Jim Montgomery. Russ, who do you have as who you believe in or don't believe in after the deadline?
I mean, I believe in most. It's interesting. So if I look at Carolina, you know, I picked them preseason to come out of the East, and they still can. But, you know, the thing that gnaws at me is, right now, Antti Raanta is ranked 19th in save percentage, and Freddie Anderson 28th. And that doesn't give me a lot of confidence going into the playoffs. I get that they're winning games. I see that they beat Tampa 6-0. But I also know that when the bright lights of the playoffs turn on, they're going to need some top-notch goaltending, and I'm not sure who's giving it to them.
Right. Well, Kev, the thing is that I don't know whether there was anyone on the market at the deadline that they could have added to improve on either on Anderson or Raanta. My question is, like last year, at the end of the year, Anderson got hurt, and they seem to have injuries at that position at the most inopportune times. If both of them are healthy, then I think they have a chance to get through the East. But I was like, okay, they got Gostisbehere, they got They got Puljujärvi from Edmonton. So they made decent little tinkering moves, but nothing of major consequence that was going to make a difference.
Yeah, but they're one of my teams that I believe in, and I agree with you. They didn't do much, but they didn't feel like they had to do much. And
right.
I share Russ's concern just about their goaltending, because I think save percentage is an indicator of where your goaltending is at. And they haven't really needed outstanding goaltender. They've got obviously a good guy in the minors, but he's very inexperienced. But he had a good run this season. His name escapes me right now.
Kochetkov.
Yeah. And but I still really like this team, and one of the reasons I like it is just like they're big on defense, and they can really defend because of that. They have length. And their stick is always wide. Like they seem to cover the whole zone. Their guys are big, they're strong, and there's just zero time and space in the defensive end. They're so good, and I think they're the best defense. Gostisbehere, I think, adds to it just from he doesn't fit their normal MO of how they play defense, because he's offensive only, but he will help them in terms of controlling the puck and having one more transition guy to carry the puck up the ice. And Burns has really had an impact. They're absolutely thrilled with where his game is at. He's up there in age, but you wouldn't know it. He's strong. He's totally into it. I think he sensed he had a real chance to win a cup here, and he's had a really strong season. So Boston and Carolina are the two teams I believe the most in.
Yeah, and I'm still going to believe in Carolina, but there's that worry. Look, I still believe in the Rangers, but I don't believe in the Kane trade. I think that's pretty obvious, and they didn't need to do it. I pointed out why. We'll see if they overcome that. A friend of mine, a good friend, said it reminded him of Jari Kurri. It is a little bit reminiscent of that. So they do have some issues with that, trying to fit that in and seeing if it doesn't screw up their chemistry. The other thing is, I still think the Islanders are going to run out of runway. They still only have 188 goals for. Sorokin's great, and he's going to have to play that way for 19 more games. And if he gets to the playoffs, he's going to have to keep playing that way. And at some point, he's going to have a little bit of a down cycle like any other goalie does. And so that to me is, because they're up in games and they're still not scoring enough for me, I still don't believe in the Islanders.
Well, Jan, let's talk about the Rangers here, because, I was a believer in them before the deadline, and now the way that they've played after the deadline, I'm starting to have my doubts. I believe in Shesterkin. I think he's one of the best 2 or 3 goaltenders in the league, and I liked the Tarasenko ad, but, the things that they've had, the hoops that they'd had to jump through lineup-wise because of the Kane deal, and my impression is that was a Dolan deal, and that was not a Drury deal, and that's been sort of communicated through the media that it might have been like Dolan saying, let's get the star guy, he wants to come here type of deal. I don't know, like they have time. They have 6 weeks before the playoffs start, and maybe they get things straightened out. But right now, this team doesn't strike me as a Gallant team. They're more of a skill team, and Gallant, when he's had success, it's not skill. It's been sort of physicality and defense that have been the high things for him.
You're kind of echoing pretty much everything that's been said on my blog and a lot of the comments. It's been very few people have been in the middle road. You're either on one side of the equation or the other. It's either you now have rolled 3 star lines out, quote unquote, with the top 9, because the third line is really more of an offensive line, not a checking line, which goes a little bit against what Gallant usually has. Who's going to be the defensive ballast? Right? We know Tarasenko is a scorer, but he's clearly not known for his defense, and Kane never really was known for his defense, even the years when he was carrying the team in Chicago offensively. But now that he's lost a step to a certain extent, whether or not you believe the level of the injury that he's playing through, who's going to be the defensive ballast on that line? Can Vincent Trocheck be the ballast that goes against both Kane and Panarin, because we know Panarin is not a guy who's going to play substantive defense. Right. Top line Kreider can do it. We know it's Zibanejad can do. The fourth line, now getting, if Mott comes back healthy, and he was skating today, which is a good sign. And we know the Department of Player Safety's name is an oxymoron to begin with, given the lack of suspension or anything they did on the Austin Watson hit, right? But you have Mott, you have VC, and you have Goodrow's a pretty solid fourth line. Look, I was the one who was saying, go get Sam Lafferty, honestly. Go get Lafferty, go get McCabe, put those two guys on the blue line as opposed to getting Mikkola, having Lafferty on your fourth line and leaving VC or Goodrow, and I would have been fine with that. Not that they would have been the scoring unit, but they would have been in more attuned to what a Gallant type of game likes to be. That being said, if Igor Shesterkin doesn't refine his game and he's kind of scuffled since the All-Star break, irrespective of who's in front of him, they're not going to go anywhere. And right now, Shesterkin has been exceedingly up and down at best, and he struggled a lot substantially. I mean, a team I happen to like a lot is New Jersey. Getting Timo Meier helps them substantively. In my opinion, though, I would have gone after and gotten one more blue liner. I mean, I do think
same with me. They're still a little too loose on defense.
Yeah, I would have got another. I would have gotten like a third pair, more defensive type of player. I mean, you have Damon Severson's had a good year, but you could use the guy to ballast against him that is a bit more defensive. If they had done that, coupled with getting Meier, I'd be a bit more confident. As you said, who's their goalie? Are you trusting Vitek Vanacek in a big spot?
That's where
Blackwood is probably more talented than Vanacek, but he just can't remain on the ice. And Kira Schmidt's played well in a backup role, but come playoff time, it's going to be Vanacek between the pipes. And whether or not you have substantive confidence in them is really going to be a key as to whether or not New Jersey can get past their last run. And they may beat Carolina out to win a division, given how they're playing right now. I mean, that division is not decided by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
Kevin, if I could take Sorokin and put him on the Devils would win the Stanley Cup. The Devils right now, I mean, I like the Meier addition. I think their defense is pretty good. They've got great skill with Heishier and Hughes and Bratt, but I don't trust their goaltending. And again, like Carolina, there was nothing on the market to really go after to address it. Whereas the Island, I'm putting both those teams in the same category here. The Islanders, Sorokin, it could be the only reason they make the playoffs because he's going to have to take them on their back. But offensively, I just don't trust them.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, they're 5-2-1 in their last 8. They were at a severe game disadvantage, but that's been lost with the Red Wings. The Red Wings have kind of fallen out of it, but there's still guys. They have other teams have games in hand. But
Ottawa, Florida, Sabres.
People don't really see the Islanders as a contender, so I did not list them as a team I don't believe in. The two that I don't believe in terms of teams that some people think are contenders, are the Devils, just for all the reasons that Mike articulated. Their goaltending. I love this team, where they're heading. I think Fitzgerald has done a fantastic job. They could be one of the top 4 contenders next year.
Yeah,
they really could. As they start, as their younger players get a year older, and they keep adding more of their talent in there. But I just don't think they're ready this year. So for that reason, and the other one is, and this is kind of surprising because I love this team, what it's done, but I don't like what I see from the Tampa Bay Lightning. I really do not. They're struggling. They don't look the same. They seem to have some issues. Vasilevsky, has had some brilliant games, but he hasn't been as consistent as he has been in previous years. They couldn't do much. I love the fact that they have some toughness now, a greater level of toughness than they had before. Just in terms of being hard to play against. So,
I know that Stamkos, that comment that he made on the weekend, I think the reporter asked him something about, turning things on like at the flick of a switch. And, he basically said, you can't do that. So we got to start playing better now. If you nail me down in terms of who I would put in category of believing in or not believing in when it comes to the Maple Leafs, right now I'd say I don't, because there's some uncertainty. I mean, the injury to O'Reilly aside, you've brought in 6 players at the deadline, and whether those players are all going to be able to mesh. And that's a question. Now, they didn't subtract from their group significantly. The only player I think that was really impactful, Russ, was Rasmus Sandin, who's scored 5 points in 2 games. But that was a decision in terms of depth and getting a first round pick back, and we'll see in a few years whether it was a smart decision or not. But
we might see next year, Mike. I mean,
maybe
he's given the opportunity. He could be a 45 to 50 point defenseman,
right.
And the fact that the Leafs made that trade off, knowing that even if he didn't do anything for them in the playoffs this year, that he'd be with him for the next 10 years doing all of that.
Well,
and the fact that they trade, I mean, there's no reason.
We don't know. Again, we don't know what in terms he has another year after this year on his contract.
Right.
So, and maybe his value goes up, but by
then other contracts fall off.
Sure.
He would be worth keeping because I looked at him like, hey, he was going to replace Riley on the power play, and he looks like he is that guy. And they made a short-sighted move. And again, if you're going to tell me they made a short-sighted move because they're going to win the Stanley Cup, okay, I'll choke on that one.
Not short-sighted, but short-term. I mean, I think they looked at.
I'm going to say both, short-term, short-sighted. But again, if you're going to tell me, hey, that's the missing piece for the Cup, and that's why they won the Cup, I'll live with that. But I don't think that's the case here.
But Kev, the thing is, and we'll finish off on this, I think that right now, even though they've had a great year, even though they have 84 points right now and they're on pace for 110, 112 points, there's a lot of uncertainty right now with Toronto. Not only the players that they acquired and them being able to fit in, but again, the core group, whether they can perform when they need to perform. So right now, I'd put them sort of in that middle category. I'm not sure. I don't know what to expect from this team. And now with Tampa Bay sort of slumping after the deadline, we don't know who we're going to see in Tampa. I expect to see the team that beat the Leafs last year. And if that's the team, then they'll win again. But a lot of uncertainty in both those teams before or after the deadline.
Well, yeah, I mean, probably uncertainty is a little too strong because they're both really good teams.
Yes.
But I think you're right. Like, it's a pick 'em series is what all we're really saying, because it's really hard to know. Which team will come out and where's Toronto's goaltending going to be? Will their top players perform? Will Tampa Bay's be the same star players they've been in the past, or will they not be able to rise to the? There was been a lot of discussion in the last 48 hours about the standards that the Lightning set for themselves. Right now they're not there. So can they get back there? Well, they did it last year, so you would assume they can, but we don't know that for sure.
Okay, great show, guys. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For the departed Jan Levine, for Russ Cohen, for Kevin Allen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.